They vary in form from the kind of the very small and sprightly and multitudinous, playful and jabbering in strange languages, often referred to as machine elves.
It was like these cat-like beings.
Ooh.
Their faces, and there were like kind of a lot of them.
Like multiple
Oh, interesting.
presences, multiple streams of information coming like in geometric patterns.
Oh, wow.
Of just pure pain and suffering.
The entities on the lower end of the spectrum are much more readily available to present themselves.
Larger, apparently far more intelligent. These often take the form of mantids, insectoid aliens, reptilian beings, various forms of god or spiritual beings that are often vast.
The entity I encountered was so huge that I couldn't get a good wide shot of it, if you know what I mean.
Wow, yeah.
It was like scales on a dragon coming by this close
Whoa.
to you. And just this purling hiss, just... I just came out with a message of like, the buck stops here, man. I'm all love.
Behind the celebratory atmosphere at Psychedelic Science lurks one of reality's strangest and most profound mysteries. Across time, cultures, and compounds, explorers report the same impossible thing: contact. Contact with other mysterious intelligences. Contact with entities. I know you've never thought about entities or ever conversed about entities, but obviously, as you're well aware, people do encounter these entities in the visionary space. And there's been this long, ongoing philosophical debate about what are they? Internal, external, psychological, literally existing in some other realm. How have you come to understand this question?
So what do we mean by internal? What do we mean by external is
Right.
the first question. And is there ultimately a difference? So perhaps kind of at the deepest level, the distinction between the internal and the external is lost. But that's not a particularly helpful position, because it just remains kind of a metaphysical position and you can't really get at it.
To me, it's us. We're all part of one big thing.
Yeah.
And, humanhood is one part of it, but there's a lot of other advanced splinterings of consciousness that have taken place. And it feels like another dimension of myself that maybe I can only access under certain chemical influences.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they're extremely real, and I think that they're here to impart lessons, and they're kind of just waiting in the wings for us to activate and explore them.
The majority of things that I might have thought was like an outside entity, in most cases, was an aspect of like my shadow. I think it's easy for like the otherness of it to get kind of caught in the loop to think that it's outside of ourselves, and then you kind of lose power over it and become even more terrifying or scary or something to avoid. So I think in most cases, what some people might think as external consciousnesses are probably aspects of their selves or their shadows. That being said, it doesn't mean that there aren't actual other entities too. And I feel like I've encountered a number of those, but the distinction of knowing what's part of you and what's outside of you, that's a lot of like the deeper work, and it's very, really difficult.
I think about it probably in two ways. More like from a soul perspective of when we're in between lives, there's a transition into that space of, well, in between incarnations, and some people may get not even past step one. So they're sort of a little stuck in letting go. So maybe that would be thought of more of like as ghosts. And then the other side of it would be more, it could be anything from leprechauns to other dimensional type beings, to plant medicine consciousness. And it starts to get very blurry because you can other it into a thing. I think the line starts to become broader and broader and more blurry, where I start to recognize it actually is like all that is. And all that is fractalated into all these many things, including us, include everything.
Yeah.
And so from an animistic point of view, everything's conscious.
A little history. So
Yeah.
I developed this internal family system stuff.
In case you aren't familiar, IFS is a therapy modality that's just exploded in popularity. In it, patients identify and converse with characters in their psyche to try to understand neuroses and bring their psyche into balance. These psychological characters are referred to as parts. And at the core of it all is capital S self, the most rooted part of your being. This is the part of you at the center that relates to the parts. Healing happens when capital S self builds trusting relationships with parts and brings them into harmony. But these parts are exclusively psychological, and I've never heard Dr. Richard Schwartz talk about external entities in any capacity before. Until now.
And in the early days, I learned that there were no bad parts, that even the parts that were so mean to people and critical and horrible, if approached with curiosity, will tell their story of how they're just trying to protect.
Yeah.
And so I believe that about everybody. And then I had clients that would have these energies in them that were really trying to hurt them, or they're encouraging them to hurt other people. But I thought, okay, no bad parts, we'll get to know it. And I started having clients ask, what are you afraid would happen if you didn't do this to me? And they would say, well, I'm not afraid of anything. I just like doing it. I like making them feel bad. And I would do that for hours because I was just certain it was just a part. At some point I said, are you a part? And they'd say no, because for whatever reason, they don't lie. What are they? We now call them unattached burdens, because they're bundles of negative energy, various kinds.
Have I thought about entities in the visionary? I've spent years thinking about entities in the visionary space. Yes. The big question's always, is it coming from inside your brain, or is it something outside of yourself? Experientially, it feels outside. Intellectually, what I've ultimately arrived at is that it is a product of the mind. Here's the thing about that, is that no matter what, it's very interesting. If it's a thing outside of you, it's interesting. If it's a thing inside of you, it's interesting. I do feel like sometimes that when I share which is ultimately that there's this multiverse of perception. I actually think that this is potentially a frontier of human understanding.
Yeah.
So I guess the question you're really asking is, are these entities just products of the machinations of a drugged mind? Or are you somehow interfacing with, communicating with another being that exists from its own side?
Yeah.
Right? So a being that is aware of you, perhaps. Is there something it's like to be a machine elf?
Right. Exactly.
It's kind of the question we're asking.
The Nagel question.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. You immediately run into another problem when you ask that question, is because the problem of other minds, which is you can never prove the existence of any other mind apart from your own. And that, of course, also applies to entities. And so for me, the question is, how do we differentiate between those? Can entities perform things? Can they, do they display abilities that extend beyond the human?
Yeah.
And if so, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're dealing with some kind of intelligence that is quote unquote external?
Right. So if someone encounters a positive entity versus a negative entity, what do you think the factors are that make that occur? Is that something to do with the psychology of the individual?
Yeah.
Is it literally like that thing just happened to be there? What do you think?
I think it's bubbling up for a reason, and whatever's bubbling up, like you were everything, you have been everyone. So whatever's appearing to you at that time, I think it's there to teach you a lesson. It's there to impart something on you. So I try to really listen to these things and listen to what I can glean from them that would apply to the soul that is inhabited by the body that is called Sean. If I'm in a negative headspace, yeah, I'm going to find entities that might reflect that. If I'm in a positive headspace, I'll find entities that reflect that. But sometimes it's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
And there's something beckoning you and calling you. And those are the ones. Those are the game changers. Those are your, for lack of a better word, I call them angels, because they're here to heal you and save you and usher you into higher dimensions of your soul that maybe have become lost continents of who you are.
I think that there's a full spectrum of what I'd say are more like external spiritual entities.
Yeah.
And that would, I think anything in that spectrum, you could probably, in like from a Western perspective, you have one spectrum of like the darker, lower entities that could be classified more as like a demonic. And then you have like angelic. Those are different types of energies and entities that I've interacted with a lot through my creative process while on like higher doses of psychedelics. And from my experience, I can say that the entities on the lower end of the spectrum are much more readily available to present themselves. You know, like they're behind my shoulder whenever I would want. I feel like they attach themselves like through something semi-traumatic. It's the higher dimensional ones that I just say they have like higher standards before they make contact.
Yeah.
You know, like they're not just ready. Like I've got to do a lot of work.
They're bundles of negative energy, various kinds. It turns out what I call self, if you can get your client to be in self without fear of them, they have no power.
Yeah.
And we can just send them out into the light usually. And for years, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 some years.
Yeah.
And I kept it a secret because I didn't want IFS to be written off. But my guidance recently has been to be open about it.
Yeah.
So turns out they're floating around, waiting to enter people. They can enter you when you're not in your body, when what I call self is out of your body. So you find them in people who got a lot of operations or people that do a lot of psychedelics or have been horribly abused as kids and they left their body. Or, you know, the shamans knew through song and sage, and they knew how to keep people covered so that when they did leave their bodies, these things couldn't come in.
You know, indigenous shamans would say absolutely.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different entities out there, and part of the point of having ceremony itself and sort of working with other plant allies like Palo Santo or sage or tobacco mostly, you're protecting yourself from, you're sort of opening up this, you're becoming very vulnerable energetically.
Yeah.
And other things kind of notice that and they try to like glom on and take use. That would be the traditional perspective.
Right.
And I trust that because I don't want to have my own hubris to say like, well, that's not true. I was like, right? You know, it's like, I've heard that time and time again.
Us in the psychedelic community that are like, yay, more people should explore this, are people that have like also have had generally positive experiences that then find themselves like in the club of like, yeah, let's have more people doing these things.
Yeah.
But I would say there's some survivorship bias going on there. And you hear about the lovely entities.
No, I want to hear about all of them. I want to hear about all of them.
Hear about the darker ones.
Yeah.
If something really positive happens to you, if you get like some positive message about like, oh, I've got it, world peace, like, see, you got it, it worked, you got the world peace message. When you when you have something that is deeply troubling, immediately lots of people in the psychedelic community will be like, what'd you eat that day? It was something wrong, wasn't it? You ate the wrong thing, didn't you? Oh, shoots boots. You didn't listen to the instructions, did you? You know, and it's like,
What do you think about people who conflate or attempt to square the circle between like psychedelic entity encounters versus what would broadly be called extraterrestrial or ultra-terrestrial? Do you think there's a there, or do you think that's kind of a mistake to...
I think there could be. But the truth is, it's hard to know. I mean, as above, so below. If it's in us, why wouldn't it be in other forms? And when I've tweaked my own consciousness or been in any altered states, you quickly realize there's a lot more than what we see with just our eyes.
Totally.
And you can feel this enormity of the energy that we're a part of. So in that soup, especially if you start to think about beyond time or space, I mean, it's just all layered on top of each other.
Yeah.
So we're told that this is the case, and I think I can feel it, and so I try to do things just for myself to like clear that out.
Clearly, this is a kind of a vast and diverse ecology, hyperdimensional ecology of beings. They vary in form from the kind of the very small and sprightly and multitudinous, which tend to be jovial, which tend to be playful and jabbering in strange languages, often referred to as machine elves, through to larger, apparently far more intelligent and powerful and often ruthless kind of beings. These often take the form of mantids, mantis-like, insectoid aliens. Reptilian beings are also quite frequently encountered, as are various forms of God or spiritual beings that are often vast and majestic and is extremely strange.
Yeah.
And often they take no obvious form at all, but are just, make their presence known simply by an undeniable presence of them, whatever that they or it or he or she is. But I think there have been some attempts to create a kind of bestiary of these intelligences. But clearly, when people undergo these extended DMT experiences, they are spending time, quite a long period of time relative to normal DMT trips, with what appear to be highly intelligent beings that remain there and interact with them for an extended period of time, that are displaying technological devices and seem to remember them, because the DMTX trials were over a number of sessions. They saw the same kinds of entities again and again, and the entities seemed to recognize that, as if to say, you're back again, that kind of thing.
What for you have been some of your most profound encounters with what you would consider to be or could be entities?
An encounter that I had that was through the smokable form of DMT. When I was blinking, there was another dimension within my eyelids, so I closed my eyes, and the entity I encountered was so huge that I couldn't get a good wide shot of it, if you know what I mean.
Wow, yeah.
It was like scales on a dragon coming by this close to you, and just this purling hiss just going through. And it was bizarre, and it was huge, and it was beyond anything I'd ever encountered before. And it came with a message that somewhere along the hose that is my bloodline, there was a kink in the hose that didn't allow love to flow from my grandmother to my father.
Wow.
And my father couldn't allow that to flow to me as well, because he just didn't get it, because my grandmother didn't get it, because her parents were alcoholics. And to see how that affected my life and my dad and his problems with substance abuse, it helped me have such forgiveness for them and realize that I'm a sensitive being that's willing to explore these realms and kind of come back with really positive messages of hope that like we can change things. I just came out with a message of like, the buck stops here, man. I'm all love, in a way that my ancestors really wanted to, but they felt closed off because of a lot of human trauma.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to encounter an entity that's so huge. I couldn't even describe it. I just saw its scales.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And it had that for me.
Did you ever get any kind of a sense of like what it was?
It felt like a dragon.
Wow.
And what do dragons do? They're kind of protecting a treasure.
Yeah.
And I don't want to put ideas on your head here, but if you look, throughout a lot of the world's mystical traditions, I think Eastern dragons are often thought of as like wisdom and insight bringers. But in the Western esoteric tradition too, one of my favorite esoteric stories is from the Corpus Hermeticum, where Hermes Trismegistus encounters the divine Logos, and the divine Logos appears as a gigantic dragon to him.
Yeah.
And like gives him the full download of like, here's what reality is, here's what humans are, here's what like the cosmos is. So yeah, that's an unbelievable.
That's what I had.
Wow.
One of those archetypal experiences and encounters. And like, look, you'd think I could sit here and wax poetic about what it is and what life is and humanity is. It is love.
So I was like, yeah, I'm down to start experimenting again a little more. And hadn't done 5-MeO, and it's the normal thing that everyone fucking asks me everywhere I go if it's 5-MeO. That's another, the ratcheting up of the novelty in the psychedelic community is like,
Yeah.
And I did the third dose, and it was like, it was just instantly just amazing. It was just like, through my body, it just felt like just pure, warm content. It was like, it felt like grandma's Christmas cookies, like when you were a kid. Like
You got so you encountered the grandma's Christmas cookies energy entity.
Yeah. It was just pure that, like getting to grandma's house and there's fresh baked cookies, and this was like, and you're a kid, and this is before she started, watching too much news. Pre-racist grandma Christmas cookies. Those are the best Christmas cookies. I did with the same person. I was like, I'm ready for the big one now. And I did that, and it was just instantly. It's just like, you are in hell. This is it. This is just, it's nothing but emptiness and ultimate suffering, but we're going to start there, and that feels like can't get any worse.
Wow.
But you'll see that in every moment it will just get increasingly worse and worse and worse, and this is just where everything ends up. You're going to get out of this, and then you're going to live the rest of your life knowing that in every moment and everyone that you interact, where everyone ultimately ends up. Let us even give you some explainer of why we are doing this.
Jesus.
It was.
But so it still felt like there was some kind of presence like walking you through that.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. Like multiple.
Oh, interesting.
Present. This is, and it was just like.
How was the information coming?
It was like knowing, but it felt like multiple streams of information coming like in geometric patterns.
Oh, wow.
That were. It was like elegant, beautiful, like whistle. Of just pure pain and suffering. That was just, and it was the most horrifying thing I've ever been through. And also pure acceptance.
I think the more profound ones are the ones that are the most broad and less hard to pinpoint, like, nature itself or mushrooms, how they weave through my life, and looking at how much my life has changed through my interaction with mushrooms. On a very personal, like intimate level, like, having journeys and feeling like you're alone, but then you're like, you're in contact with this energetic intelligence, and it feels like it's just very personal.
Yeah.
No one else, I can't show that to you or prove it to you. It's just like, I had that experience, and you feel like I have that over and over again in different ways. And then it starts to bleed into my life, not just when I'm imbibing a particular substance or a mushroom. It's like that becomes less relevant. And then when it becomes amplified in other people's experiences with that same consciousness, the mushroom, and then it's like coming back to me in different forms, fractalated forms.
Yeah.
It's profound, especially when that's over many, many years.
Yeah.
I've had more acute experiences in journeys, with ayahuasca the first time for sure, like actually feeling like you hear voices. It's hard to say if it's my voice or their voice. It definitely feels like an othering, and it's like a conversation.
Yeah. And so was this sounding like a conversation, like an English conversation in your mind?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I made it into a song. It's the Grandmother's Fear song.
Okay.
The voice said to me, "Do you want to know what enlightenment is?" And I was not sure, because it's like, I don't know. What does that entail?
Yeah.
It entailed purging, among other things.
Of course.
And then I understood, and it was, but it was a voice, playful.
So just to clarify what you just said, it was like, "Do you want to know what enlightenment is?" And
That's
you were
exactly
like,
what
"Yeah,"
it said.
and then it was puke.
No, I mean, I said,
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not just gonna be like, oh yeah. It's
Yeah.
like, because I was in like rocket fuel space. Of,
Right.
Eventually I acquiesced, because you can't really fight it. And eventually I did have this purge. So the thing is, the understanding and the answers went way beyond words.
Yeah.
It was through felt experience. And that's where like the real juice is anyway.
Sure.
We're really distilling it down into something quite pedantic when we get into just like phrases I hear or words I hear.
Mm-hmm.
Because the real understanding and the learning of the human experience, and I think of like, if there are extra dimensional beings, words would be annoying.
Yeah.
It would be through feeling.
Yes.
Through, if anything, it'd be through experience. Perhaps whole experiences are being manipulated. I mean, perhaps the entire human lifetime is one giant, So in that way, that feels far more intelligent to me.
I feel like there's a spirit of just like creativity. I'd almost call it like a higher creativity that's just infinite and universal and somewhat accessible at all times. There's like a deeper thing to tap into. And like, when I get to the place where there's like enough discipline and I've demonstrated like enough respect, I mean, part of it is like discipline is a big deal. Like if I want to bring in, if there's a creative energy that is available for a human to be like a temporary domicile for, that energy is really discerning. It's like all the work I do, all the creative work I've done to train like hand-eye coordination and understanding form and color is like it's, you want to think of yourself as you're almost like a race car for the divines, like if you want, I think it will be attracted to a vehicle that has more capability. There's a place where in the journeys I've had, I can tell when there's something inside of me, and when it's something that's just like not me, and in those not me moments, like the giveaways are like, I look down, like I'm working on something and I'm reaching into like an area or outside of a comfort zone that I've never have, and it's totally working.
Yeah.
I'm doing things I've never done before. It's kind of like that feeling when you just like stand up on a surfboard and like you're like, I'm fucking surf.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Yeah.
And times you're like, you'll look down at your hand. I was just like, who hand is that? Like those are the moments when that comes through. Part of the practice is like not getting freaked out, and it's like, how long can I maintain this for without getting too excited, without questioning myself or doubting myself? Because it can, as quickly as it comes, it can go too. And it's a mysterious thing. I don't pretend that I know all the subtle dynamics of how it works and how it doesn't work, but I know that it's real. I know that it's a thing just because of my own gnosis and having experienced it so many times.
Do you think this is probably what would have been called the muses or the muse?
Yeah.
What about any of these more guide, like benevolent experiences? Have you had any of those?
A lot, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, like the first time, I did this really powerful unburdening where we pulled a little girl out of a terrible scene, and this woman felt better, and she said, all of a sudden there's this skywriting. It says, "You've come a long way, baby." And I thought, okay, that's kind of interesting, but let's not pay a lot of attention to that. But it kept showing up in later sessions, and then I got curious and had her ask what it was, and it said it wasn't a part; it was just there to help. So that was the first time, and subsequently things like that do show up at various crucial times, and either are very supportive or will give us some direction about where to go next, or might hold some parts while others get work done. And when you ask them if they're parts, they'll say no. They'll kind of hedge as to what they are. But I've come to call them guides.
Yeah.
And I've come to believe that they're actually spiritual entities. But I don't impose that. But people, if you do enough IFS, you're going to run into the phenomena, both the UB phenomena and the guide phenomena. And I just want people to know that that's there, and the guides are extremely useful.
You have your dreams. Yeah, I mean, that's another, I mean, that's a weird, I didn't even think of that. But I mean, I've definitely had dreams where I felt like I was most definitely talking to an other or an entity that was very clear and confusing at the same time.
Yeah.
Sometimes it felt like alien ones, for sure.
Share that.
One that comes to mind right now is, it was like these cat-like beings.
Ooh.
Their faces, and there were like kind of a lot of them, and they were sharing with me a sound that you could vocalize that had, it was very important meaning. And there's been other dreams like that where it was a word sound, like a particular, and we were doing it. And when we were doing it in the dream, it was like it was fully psychedelic experiences happening, like subsuming into the cat, and then it's, you know, like very ayahuasca-esque or something.
Interesting.
Yeah, very wild stuff. You know, what is that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Other ones where spent like many hours in a dream with this being. It was walking me around. It's almost like my life. But the end became like this Medusa type thing.
Whoa.
That it was subsumed. But it was not a bad thing. It was more like a loving energy, but it was like being consumed.
Wow. Wow.
And it felt like you had to give into that. So there was the level of choice.
Okay, so the cosmic serpent of wisdom and love is a pretty intense entity encounter, but what else sticks with you as novel experiences?
Entities that are so more like how ink in water behaves, and really getting a kick out of them, and them coming up and them like almost taking a look under the hood of Sean and being like, "You're good, man," and sending me on my way. But I wondered, what am I to them?
Yeah.
Like, what do I appear to be to them? Because they're like, they really lack form.
Yeah.
And like to encounter those beings is much stranger to me than something I can describe as a dragon.
Right.
This ink and water things, I'm like, who are you guys?
When you say ink and water, do you just mean it feels like they appear and then just evaporate very quickly?
Yeah, exactly. Like the way it looks if like a fucking, when Shamu takes a shit in the fucking thing, you know what I mean? Like just like, hey, here I am.
If we do really live in a universe that is conscious, right? Why wouldn't there just be, you know, like the bubbles on like rushing water?
Yeah.
Maybe that's like, if consciousness is like an ocean, maybe some waves last a really long time, and some are just like these little droplets of like
sea
bubbling.
foam.
Yeah, like conscious sea form. It's like wee or for just like a moment. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, that's a really good one. That's a very settling perspective for me.
Can you give us a palate cleanser with some with some purple lady jams?
Yeah, there's this purple woman that I've seen many times in a DMT space, and I kind of got consumed by an idea of what she is because, you know, other people report these very similar experiences, and that's like a very confusing, interesting thing in terms of like explanatory power from my perspective.
Yeah.
Is one that, it's an anchor that I like to remind myself of to like, don't get too sure of yourself,
right?
You know.
And I know you've told this story so many times, but I remember you and Ramin had some crazy synchronicity with the purple lady, or maybe he told that story.
No, that's some confounding things. There were some editorial liberties taken in the Tales from the Trip.
Oh, that's
series.
what it was. Okay.
Maybe
well,
it was.
My memory is that he had not done it, and you introduced him to it, and it had not said anything about the purple lady.
No, that wasn't Ramin. So that was just a random comic. Yeah.
Okay. Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Bob Kazabi, actually, was his name. But yeah, so that's what I'm saying. They like blended
Okay.
things together that would lead it.
But
to
is
believe
that part true? Like he did it,
Oh,
had
yeah,
the
yeah,
purple lady encounter, and then
100%,
she asked
yeah,
about you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah. Her and other entities that were
Yeah.
in there asked about. Yeah, it freaked me out as well. Spent a lot of time thinking about that.
Well, I mean, from my very first experience,
Yeah.
and it was undeniably apparent to me in that moment that I was interfacing with some kind of intelligence that was entirely non-human, entirely beyond the human, what seemed to be a timeless, immense alien intelligence of some sort. That was undeniably apparent to me. But, I mean, I don't think that a discarnate being, being that doesn't have a body by definition, actually occupies the form of an insect or of a reptilian.
Yeah.
I don't think that makes any sense to me, or an anaconda or a panther. But these are clearly the forms it uses. Now, whether this is the brain attempting to make sense of these patterns of these highly unusual patterns of information that are entering the brain, or in fact whether this intelligence, whatever it is, this intelligent agent is simply using the brain, it's seizing control, it's commandeering the brain, and directing the visions, directing the structure of the experience, and that might be to use form in order to generate something that kind of makes sense to you, or in order to transmit some kind of message to you in the state. So I don't, and it might be a mixture of the two. It might be the brain both trying to make sense of the information as well as kind of directed information into the brain. I'm not sure which, but I lean towards the idea when these entities or this intelligence seems to have complete control over the experience, then it makes sense that they are kind of directing the form that these entities take, whether it's to frighten you with a vicious mantid alien being, or whether it's to kind of perform and to kind of show you what's possible using perhaps the more jovial, impish, machine elf kind of motif. Recently, I was speaking to Andres Gomez Emilson, the Qualia Research Institute, and he was describing, so I'm interested in, yes, I mean, I've heard many stories about that sound just incredible, about beings manufacturing universes, vomiting up micro universes that expand into large universes. And there's just things that almost it strains the imagination to even conceive of what people have actually experienced. But I'm particularly interested in the intelligence of these beings and the apparent intellectual, cognitive sophistication of these beings. And Andres has some very cool stories about beings that seem to be able to perform kind of mathematical operations very, very rapidly, geometric operations, so tiling surfaces in a certain way.
Like Penrose tile type things?
That kind of thing, yeah. Doing things that when a mathematically unsophisticated person would see them, would just go, wow, that's incredible.
Right.
Like rapidly tiling a wall with 4 colors and then doing it again and doing it again.
Yeah.
Most people just look at that and go, wow, that's fascinating. Whereas when you send someone who is mathematically sophisticated into the space, like you go, oh, wait a minute, that's actually very difficult to do. Take me hours to do one.
Right.
And these beings seem to be able to do it in a fraction of a second.
Good point.
So I like this idea that we don't need to kind of test the beings as such, give them mathematical problems to solve, but that they betray their intelligence. They can't help but betray their intelligence just by everything they do kind of smacks of some kind of extremely high-level intelligence that is entirely beyond the human. And I think that's really important aspect to investigate.
Like when we try to distill it down to a thing like an entity, it feels so reductive.
Yeah.
And I feel like the examples and the evidence of our communication with things that are larger than our sense of mind are so all around us.
Mm-hmm.
And creativity in music, for instance, is one of them. Where does that come from?
Yeah.
I don't know. What is the experience of it like for us? It's sort of like excitement or bliss or curiosity, and that is the driver of it. What is springing forth, that curiosity? I don't know, but it feels that that is doing a service, or that's some kind of honoring to what we really are.
Yeah.
Which is we are creation, which is creativity. Like, we are creating. That's all we're doing, like, continuously, with our thoughts, with our actions, of course, and words. But we are this being of creation, and that is what it means to have an experience as a soul, as a human. And so when I have that mindset, it becomes very holy, or it becomes very imbued with spirit, just life, what normally you might think of as nothing or as boring. And it's sort of the same but when you get into these creative states, it feels like it's like turning up the brightness on a light, where you're really shining a light. It feels like a kind of honoring in some way of like your parents or something, or like whatever you've come from. But it's in all of us. It really is.
Yeah.
But I can see it in places like with Samskara. It's just like, I've worked on Samskara. Samskara took years to make. We've been playing it for years. And there was like one time, 4 or 5, maybe 2016 or 17 years ago, I watched Samskara, and I did some Wook gave me some DMT, a pen to do. Wow. And when Dharma Dragon came down, like the big blue face, she just like, it was like the edges of the dome disappeared, and it was like the entity of that came through. And she kind of like mouthed some words, and she fucking straight up was like talking to me.
Wow.
Like, now, like, do you see what you've done? Like, do you see what this is?
Wow.
This is a portal that you made, and you haven't known this until right now. I'm telling you what you've done. So, whatever it is, it definitely doesn't experience the same type of like linear consciousness than we do.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting characteristic.
For sure.
There's that, and Bigfoot is totally real. I'll just end with that one.
Love
Sasquatch,
that, brother.
Straight up. Yeah.
Yeah.
We need to do more Sasquatch shows.
Immense love for hanging out, my friends. A couple of things I wanted to let you know. First, all of the unedited interviews from the shoot will be available both in the YouTube members only section and over at patreon.com/third eye drops. Also, this was my first attempt at a more documentary style flavor of content. If you enjoyed it, you know what to do. Stimulate the algorithm, like, sub, comment, share, etc. And before I forget, on the note of comments, have you, my friend, had what you would consider to be an entity encounter? Let me know in the comments. Would love to hear the tale. Much love, and we'll see you in the next transmission.